Look down at what you're wearing right now. A shirt, pants, maybe shoes, maybe a jacket. You put those on this morning without a second thought. The same way you brush your teeth or pour coffee. Automatic, invisible, a habit so deep it doesn't feel like a choice anymore. But here's the thing. For most of human history, your ancestors wore nothing at all. And the real reason that changed is not what you think. It's not modesty. It's not shame. It's not even cold weather. The answer reaches into something far stranger. A prehistoric arms race, a parasite, and a decision that may have quietly altered the course of your entire species. Let's go back. Way back. Your earliest ancestors, the ones walking upright across the African savanna roughly 2 million years ago, were covered in hair. Not thick fur like a bear, something lighter, finer, but enough to regulate body temperature, deflect sun, and protect skin. They didn't need clothes. Their bodies were the clothes. Then something happened. Around 1.7 million years ago, anatomical evidence suggests early Homo erectus began losing that body hair at a dramatic rate. Anthropologists believe this was connected to one critical adaptation: sweating. As the brain grew larger and humans began running longer distances to chase prey, the body needed a more efficient cooling system. Hair was the enemy of that system. Losing it let sweat evaporate faster, keeping the brain cooler during long hunts under a brutal equatorial sun. It was a brilliant trade. Lose the hair, keep the brain, but it created a problem. A naked body under direct African sun is an exposed body. Skin burns, skin tears. Skin becomes vulnerable to ultraviolet radiation in ways that body hair previously absorbed. So the body compensated. Melanin production increased, darkening the skin to protect it. Your deepest evolutionary ancestors had dark skin not because of geography alone, but because nakedness demanded it. For hundreds of thousands of years, this worked fine. Homo erectus spread across Africa. No clothes required, but then your ancestors started moving. The fossil record suggests that modern Homo sapiens began migrating out of Africa roughly 70,000 years ago, pushing north into colder climates, the Middle East, Central Asia, eventually Europe. And here's where the naked body stops being enough. You can sweat beautifully in the Sahara. You will die shivering in a Siberian winter. So the question researchers have long asked is, exactly when did humans start wrapping themselves in animal skins? For a long time, the archaeological evidence was almost impossibly thin. Organic materials rot. Animal hides decompose. What survives is stone, bone, and the impressions those materials leave behind. Scientists had to find indirect evidence. Tools specifically shaped for processing hides, bone needles capable of stitching, and the residue of ancient behaviors preserved in sediment. The oldest bone needles ever discovered were found in Denisova Cave in Siberia, dated to roughly 50,000 years ago. They're delicate, precise, far more refined than anything needed to simply crack an animal open for meat. Archaeologist Francesco Dorico, whose work on Paleolithic tool cultures has reshaped how researchers understand behavioral modernity, argues that these needles indicate not just clothing, but tailored clothing. Garments shaped to fit a body, with sleeves, with seams. That changes everything. It means that 50,000 years ago, a human being sat in a cave and planned. They envisioned a garment that didn't yet exist. They processed an animal hide, perforated it with a needle no thicker than a modern pin, threaded sinew through each hole, and stitched something wearable into existence. That is abstract thinking. That is creativity applied to survival. But here's where it gets even stranger. In 2011, a team of evolutionary biologists led by Mark Stoneking at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology published a study using a method no one had tried before. They didn't look at human fossils. They looked at lice. Specifically, they looked at body lice, the kind that live in clothing, and compared their DNA to head lice, which live in hair. Because body lice can only survive in the folds of fabric, their existence is entirely dependent on humans wearing clothes. No clothes, no body lice. The genetic divergence between the two louse populations, the moment body lice split from head lice and adapted to fabric, could be used to date. Roughly, when humans first started wearing enough clothing to create a viable louse habitat. The result? Somewhere between 83,000 and 170,000 years ago. That number is startling. It pushes the origin of clothing back tens of thousands of years before the bone needles, deep into the African Middle Stone Age, long before the Great Migration north. Humans may have started wearing something, even loosely draped animal hides, not primarily because of cold, but for other reasons entirely. Protection from insects, social signaling, ritual, and that shifts the story. Because if clothing predates cold weather necessity, then something else drove its adoption. Anthropologist Ian Gilligan of the University of Sydney, who has spent years studying the thermal and social functions of prehistoric clothing, argues that early garments likely served multiple simultaneous purposes. Thermal protection in temperate nighttime temperatures, even in Africa, would have extended survival. But Gilligan also notes that the symbolic and social functions of bodily covering may have been just as powerful as the practical ones. Think about what clothing does beyond warmth. It marks identity. It signals group membership. It can hide the body or display it. It communicates status, role, readiness, danger. In a species that was rapidly developing language, art, and symbolic behavior, the body itself became a canvas. The oldest known dyed fibers, flax fibers, found in the Republic of Georgia, date to roughly 34,000 years ago. They were twisted and colored, suggesting intentional textile production. The colors chosen weren't random. They required deliberate sourcing of pigment, a process that implies meaning was being assigned to color, that what you wore was beginning to say something about who you were. That impulse never left you. Today you wake up and choose what to put on based on where you're going, who you'll see, how you want to feel, what you want to communicate. You might not phrase it that way, but something in you is running the same ancient calculation your ancestors ran in a fire-lit cave. This covering signals something. This combination of color and shape tells the world, and tells yourself, something about who you are today. The parasite understood it before you did. Body lice evolved specifically to exploit the gap between your naked skin and the fabric you wrapped around it. They read your clothing as permanent habitat, as shelter, as home. They adapted to a human behavior so thoroughly that their biology became dependent on it. In a way, they are the oldest proof that clothing was real, that it persisted, that it became a permanent feature of what it means to be human. You are a clothed species, not because your body failed, not because you were ashamed, but because your brain grew large enough to imagine protection that didn't yet exist, and then made it real. Homo erectus lost the hair and gained the cooling system. Homo sapiens lost the last of the protection and built a replacement out of sinew and animal skin and, eventually, cotton, polyester, silk. The bone needle found in Siberia is 50,000 years old. It fits in the palm of your hand. It is thinner than your fingernail. And someone carried it. Someone used it until it wore down. Someone cared about the object because the object kept them alive in a cold that would have otherwise killed them. Look down again at what you're wearing. You put it on this morning without thinking. But what you did, that automatic, invisible act, is the product of somewhere between 83,000 and 170,000 years of human decision-making. Adaptation, creativity, and survival. Your clothes are not fashion. They are not culture. They are not modesty. They are the latest version of a solution your species invented when it was cold and naked and smart enough to do something about it.